Well, the Oyo State government has advised residents to disregard reports that it had concluded plans to convert parts of the public-owned Agodi Botanical Gardens into a residential government reserve area. Commissioner for Lands, Housing and Urban Development, Williams Akinfumilayo, said this in Ibadan, where he also assured that the government's planned housing project would not encroach into the Agodi Botanical Garden now or anytime soon. Social media has recently been abuzz with insinuations that the government intends to convert portions of the 9.11 hectares of landed property at the garden into a residential area.
We are here to see things ourselves and to confirm otherwise whether such a decision has been taken, and to know the truth and nothing but the truth. The people out there, now we want them to know that the government of Oyo State, being led by Governor Morakinyo, does not have any intention to convert Agodi Garden into an housing estate. What the government has in plan is to upgrade Agodi Garden into an international botanical garden, which will serve the people of Oyo State better than it's doing right now.
We're joined by Tunde Morakinyo, a community forestry and tropical forest conservation expert and executive director of the African Nature Investors Foundation. Good to see you and thanks for your time. Well, the government of the state has spoken, but again, this is coming on the back of a series of what's happened in times past in many places in the country where parks, gardens and recreation centers have been taken by governments or individuals into something else. First of all, help us break it down by talking about the importance first of having recreation centers, in fact, greenery around communities and areas before we delve into the matter proper.
Thank you very much. I think, first of all, I want to start by explaining that I grew up in Ibadan. I'm an indigene of Ibadan, and I spent my whole childhood in Ibadan. So the city means a lot to me. And where I live, in a place called Bodija, is right on the edge of the Ogunpa Forest Reserve. I think it's very important to point out that Agodi Gardens is only a part of a larger Ogunpa Forest Reserve. And my house, or the area in Ibadan where I live, is right on the edge of that Ogunpa Forest Reserve. And the real function of the forest on this very hilly terrain, which is Ogunpa Forest Reserve, is to protect Ibadan city from flooding. During the 1980s, I remember when the Ogunpa burst its banks, and hundreds of people were killed in Ibadan due to the flooding. And the importance of greenery, the importance of forests in the city, particularly in slopey areas, is to protect the forest from flooding, protect the city from flooding, to make a city cool, and to basically make a city more livable. When you remove forests, when you remove greenery, you make a city a much more difficult place to live, and you can have floods during the wet season, which can result in deaths and destruction of property. So greenery is very, very important. Number one, to prevent flooding. Number two, to keep cities cool, but also to reduce the effects of air pollution, which can cause respiratory disease to people living in cities.
Tunde Morakinyo, and I mean, I must say, I grew up my early years in Ibadan, Molete, and what have you. So just discussing this brings back memories. But while the state government says it has no plans to sell any part of Agodi Gardens, I was actually going to ask you how the importance, the significance of this Agodi Gardens itself. And are you comforted with the fact that the government says it has no plans of taking it over in any way or form? It's not going to become a concrete jungle.
So let me maybe I want to explain very clearly. So you have the Ogunpa Forest Reserve. Agodi Gardens is just a small part of the bigger Ogunpa Forest Reserve. Agodi Gardens is about 9 hectares in size, but the Ogunpa Forest Reserve, which is a much larger piece of forest that runs all the way up the hill to Premier Hotel, this is a much, much larger piece of forest. And I'm glad that Agodi Gardens, the small part of Ogunpa Forest Reserve, is not being cleared. But as an Ibadan resident, what we are worried about is that the forest, which is the much, much larger forest behind Agodi Gardens, which is, I believe, 52 hectares in size, is in the process of being cleared as we speak. And this could result in terrible flooding for the housing estates surrounding that the Ogunpa watershed. So I'm glad Agodi Gardens is not being cleared. That is very, very good, because it's an important place. But the Ogunpa Forest Reserve, which is behind Agodi Gardens, is much, much bigger and of much greater ecological importance to Ibadan city. So I'm glad that Agodi Gardens is not being cleared, but we want to also make sure that Ogunpa Forest Reserve behind Agodi Gardens is also not cleared of trees.
And I did say earlier on that this is more like deja vu to a lot of Nigerians like yourself, myself inclusive. We grew up, and first you hear the government saying to people about their recreation centers, or whether it's a park or a football pitch, that don't you worry, it won't be touched. And the next minute is taking over buildings and all sorts are there. So in this case, are there things that are indicative of genuine government's intention about what it said about this park and garden?
So I mean, I think, you know, the government have been absolutely correct. They have no intention of converting any part of Agodi Garden into a housing estate. But as I said earlier, the real concern, or the really major concern, is the clearance of the forest behind the gardens on the hillside, because the clearance of that forest could result in flooding, which will affect the housing and the residents of the people of Ibadan city. And we would like to have assurance from the government that they would not clear the forest in the greater Ogunpa Forest Reserve, of which Agodi Gardens is only a small part. You know, government has the duty to protect the lives and the livelihoods of people in the city and their quality of life. And these forests, which are protecting the watershed of the Ogunpa River, are very, very important to the quality of life of the people in Ibadan city. As I said, not just in terms of preventing flooding, but also preventing air pollution from traffic, and preventing climate change in the city, which causes a heating of the city. So we would like to have assurance from government that they will not destroy this forest, which is important to the lives of people in Ibadan.
Tunde Morakinyo, community forestry and tropical forest conservation expert. Thank you very much for joining us. Thankfully, the government has said it has no plans of touching the Agodi Botanical Garden.